Yeah, it looks like we're live. Let's see if the video is picking up the audio and such, so forth and whatnot. Test. Come on. Yeah, I'm supposed to be live. Let's go. Come on, play. I guess I have to help it. Yeah, supposed to be live. Let's okay. Go. All right. So it's working. Just doing that just to make sure, right? If you don't make sure it's working, then gotta go through the whole crap of somebody telling you something's not working. So it's just better to do that ahead of time. Just being considerate. Yes, where do we want to go? Comments, of course. There's not much to speak of, and usual crap, pretty much, and so forth and whatnot. I'll just check, see if there's anything new. All right, so the Michael Falwell guy. Hi, Gary. He's been chatting with a retired physicist who is now in his 70s. So that's always a subject right there, is this, older versus younger thing. A lot of the dissidents are older fellows. I guess I'm in that category now, unfortunately, too. And I don't know why that is exactly. Probably with experience and all that kind of stuff. And it takes time to work your way around all this stuff and whatever. So maybe it does take some experience in life to be a critic, and that's just the way it is. Like yourself, he is in the firm belief that wrong assumptions have been made concerning foundational explanations of phenomena and reality, and that there are certainly alternative possible explanations that are more sensible, plausible. All right, now the trick there is that people do have their own wacky theories, and frankly, they have the same fundamental flaws in that they don't seem to be that willing to have their ideas tested. They just want to say, look, it looks like it, and that's sort of what physics did. It looks like it. That's good enough. We like it to this story, and that's it. And so the analogy is, you can go with like a Sasquatch story or something, right? You see these vague images of something, and people say, I saw it. It's this thing that went across the thing, and it, what else could it be? And blah blah blah. And they really don't want to hear that. Oh, it was just a bear. It's walking on two legs, and it's all it was. It's a bear. They want to hear something simple. They really kind of want it to be something magical, and they want to have a special experience, something like that. And I suppose there's something like that going on here, because most of the dissident or alternative theories usually are just as UFO-y wacky as the mush, physics has jumped to. I don't know, my hair is a little bit. Push this over this way, see if that helps. I don't know. Anyway, so they're just as bad. So there's really no process. Physics is a closed mind, and they really aren't trying very hard to have their theories tested, their evidence tested, their assumptions for all the complex experiments and everything else. There just seems to be no interest at all in making sure they got the right answer. They're all kind of sound and act like used car salesmen who just want to shove all the problems under the rug, make them go away, pretend they don't exist. And it's just fundamentally bullshit. All right, but the belief that that physics is founded on weak evidence, that belief, that understanding, that statement as a fact should be acceptable to everyone. Everyone should be able to admit that, whoa, the evidence is weak. And it'd be really great if we had better evidence than this. And they could even argue that all the dissonance theories are also weak. That would be okay with me. I'm just saying, just concede that the evidence isn't good. And you're drawing these extraordinary claims, extraordinary conclusions, and you have very little evidence. And the fact that people can't even concede that's factually what took place, especially in the early 1900s, when most of these theories were written onto the stone, Einstein is right kind of headlines based on crappy evidence. And then the whole quantum mechanical, most proven theory in the history of mankind propaganda invented out of nothing, just propaganda, just a statement they all make. It's done more for all of us than any other theory ever composed. It's answered more questions and solved more problems. No, it hasn't. Just bullshit. Anyway, so I mean, that's the number one problem here: weak evidence and no subject. I'm just going to write it down again. I got it written down so many times. And the fact that it's just a glaring fact, that the fact that nobody will concede that, none of the people insulting me will concede that their evidence is weak, not strong, weak. And that says a lot about them. All right. All right. He has his own idea on causes, right? So that's where we get into trouble, because frankly, everybody who has their own idea is always some sort of nutty idea, ether and ropes and, electric universe bullshit to lightning bolt crapola shit, garbage theories and effects, but basically no one wants to hear. Yeah, well, I frankly don't, I go out and hear it because it's part of my job now to understand what other people are proposing. But I really don't want to hear it either. I mean, they're all just kind of bullshit theories that people just state this crap, and because of one little, like they'll find one flaw or something in a complex mathematics and say, there, I've proven relativity wrong, and therefore my theory is right. Wait, no, it doesn't do any of that. There are bold claims with very little evidence again. Let's see, he's challenged academia for decades with little or no effects. I don't know exactly in what form he challenged them. His words were, it's like hitting a brick wall. Well, in some respects, like I said, it depends on what kind of evidence he's got for his theory. And I just find most of the dissidents quite wanting, especially the example of the David D. Hilster, who, will claim, the Earth, there's glaring evidence that the Earth had less gravity and was, 10 times smaller than it is now, or some other kind of crap. And it's just like, it's crap. It's based on nothing. A couple of little tricks, gimmicks of similarities and consistencies with something. And again, we've seen that flat earthers can make some arguments that are, I don't know if they're valid, but, that have some ring of truth. But it's not enough evidence to prove anything. Simply put, he was not saying people who have invested, he was saying people who have invested 10, 20, 30 years or more in their life following the current models and assumptions just do not or refuse to consider anything to the contrary. Again, part of the argument is they have a right to say, I'm not going to waste my time debunking every truther that shows up at the door. But clearly there does need to be a process, some vetting process that does force them to deal with valid arguments. And I would argue that mine are valid arguments, like the lens is the wrong shape. That how can you use a diffraction gradient as a beam splitter? Can't create two equal beams, impossible for it to create two equal beams of light. These are valid critiques that they should have to deal with. Why are photons magically exempt from the inverse square law? what rationale could you possibly have for that exemption? If any headway is to be made, you need to concentrate on the next gen. Yeah, well, I don't agree. I don't think they're any more capable of having perspective. I think they're less capable of having perspective. Frankly, if progress is going to be made, people have to quit being fanatics and, dogmatic fanatics, fascists, if that's what you want to call them. Their minds are closed, and they're closed based on very little evidence and a bunch of, idol worship, name worship. The up and coming future science community before they are dogmatized. Yeah, I just don't know if that's going to happen, because the younger they are, the more they daydream about magical universes that have all kinds of magical functions, because they want to imagine living in a better world than we exist in. And that's a real problem with this too, is nobody wants to hear a truth that isn't very, there's no fun in it. And the truth just doesn't have much fun in it. And that's a fact. All right, Alexander Zaptier. Garbage theories like the Force and Yoda. Okay, I don't know. What does that mean? All right, I want to make another comment explaining what the context of this. Garbage theories. I don't think there was ever a theory, the Force and Yoda. I don't think anyone's taken the idea that Star Wars was talking about a real thing. They were just they needed a plot device to make everything all right. And so they were just using this magical force to make it to make it seem like there was something to live for, that life wasn't just going to be war forever or something like that. It was a little hope device. So what's your point? I mean, it's unfortunate that my theory says force is really important. Yeah, force is a real thing in the universe. Now, you want to mock it and say force doesn't mean anything. There's no such thing as force. Well, yeah, there is. There just happens to be. And the fact that Star Wars said some things about force doesn't mean I can't use the word force anymore. It's still a valid piece of vocabulary. Can you understand that? You were explaining that people believe in nonsense a couple of minutes back. It's a witty comment, that's all. Yeah, I hate witty comments that aren't, frankly, very witty. And it's really not the problem. Star Wars isn't the problem with physics. And it's not the problem with the people in physics who can't recognize and concede a simple truth, that their evidence is incredibly weak, that their whole model was cobbled together based on a bunch of one assumption after another assumption after another assumption, and none of those assumptions have been thoroughly tested. None of them are solid enough for the gigantic edifice they have built on it. It's not an edifice, the gigantic structure they have built on it. These assumptions. And if they were honest people, they would admit that yeah, Einstein just threw a bucket of crap on the table. Let's just make time and space bent. It fits the inverse square law, so, sort of works. But as an idea, it was never tested. I mean, tested in the sense of, well, of course, yes, the inverse square law is a real law. That's a real effect in the universe. And yes, there's a relationship between velocity and clocks breaking, but that doesn't mean space is bent. But anyway. All right. Speaking of fuzzy-haired quack. So this is somebody called Superfly. Well, that's just so amazing. So this is again on a Ken Wheeler video. I mean, all this room to sit there and make fun of him for his appearance. And he does it. He makes fun of other people's appearances. He's somehow totally distracted by the fact that Steinmetz was, a dwarf with a, bad back. He can't get over it. He has to just keep emphasizing it. He's obviously stuck on appearances, and you're stuck on appearances, and somehow they mean something. So Ken Wheeler doesn't want people to judge him based on the fact that he's a fat, bald, tattooed, egomaniacal crazy fuck. But those are just character defects. Those are legitimate criticisms. The ego problems he has, and the fact that he's irrational and insane. But I mean, it's just such a stupid comment to make. I mean, I don't really waste my time just going, Ken Wheeler's fat, bald, and tattooed. I really just don't. But if that's what you think a good argument's supposed to look like, then okay. Have it your way, retard. Oh, this is so pathetic. All right, so this is a funny fellow here. Some redneck, sunglasses, the baseball cap, and a beard. Real winner. Let's see. I can't see much else. Doesn't have any of his own videos. Ideas and whatever this is, it's not consequences. I don't know what that is. Some kind of Spanish thing, I guess. Anyway. Anyway. Hey, well, here, I'll do this one first. Dude. So he starts with dude. This is a fat turd calling other people a dude. Get a fucking haircut. Right. So this is coming from, a balding loser who apparently can't see very well either, needs sunglasses. I mean, and you're fat, no doubt. Just amazing. Go on a diet, fatty. So get a haircut before coming on camera. No, I'm not going to do any of that, you silly shit. Scumbag, dirty caveman. So again, fat, smelly white man, die. White filth, he calls me. You're the one that looks filthy, frankly. So, geez, real winner argument. Yeah, you really beat me with that one. So then he says, hey, Mr. Caveman. So again, if you just grow your hair naturally, you're a caveman. Okay, fine. That's retarded. I'll just let you know. That's a retarded standard. Crazy fuck. What? What is this? Whatever. Can you talk about anti-gravity? Why would I talk about anti-gravity? Is this like saying anti-charge? No, there's only two charges, okay? There's plus and the minus. There's no anti-minus. There's plus. That's the anti-minus. And the anti-minus is, the anti-plus is minus. If you want to do anti-gravity, you have to do more gravity going the other way. Some other force going the other way, retard. Just stupid comment. Anyway, I mean, just the level of ignorant fuck that shows up on this channel and you're saying, for what reason? What possible idea? What kind of knowledge of physics could this idiot have? Why is he bothering? As the matter rotates a counterclockwise direction, okay, as it neutralizes physical weight. I guess I have to read the first comment because that makes no sense. Could cancellation of material weight be considered as anti-gravity? Cancellation of material weight. Again, so you're doing this anti thing. I mean, how exactly would you cancel it? You can't make it go away. It has mass. That means it's going to create this force effect. And the only way you can do something about it is to create a counter force to counter it. What's so complicated? I mean, anti-gravity is just creating enough energy going the other way, and then you're, anti-gravity. Anyway, it's just, if you think there's some magical way around it, okay, fine, you can think that, but frankly, I don't believe there is. From my own theory says that's not going to happen. You're not going to undo the force effect. You can only create an opposite force effect. As the matter rotates on a counterclock direction, this is how it's written. As the matter rotates on a counterclock direction, as it neutralizes physical weight. Rotation can only change something in a balance sense. You can change the center of something's gravity by rotating, mass in like a collection of masses. But you can't make gravity, you can't make its mass go away by rotating. So I guess I'll leave the comments. I want to answer them, so I just delete them because they're stupid. Yeah. All right. So this is another waste of time, but let's go ahead and do it. All right. So this Bovada seems like the marbles guy again. Okay. So he's just going to keep trying to. He's a conventional physics apologist, and so he's going to, no matter what you say, he's going to keep trying to find some way around it. And these are idiotic. Well, they're yeah, they're not very good attempts to evade the simple truths I've pointed out, that the lens for gravitational lensing is the wrong shape. Now, let's just understand the argument. Every single diagram always draws the same lens because they want to create the illusion of the same effect. That is, light comes from a distant object, goes to the big lens, and is focused to our eye. And then it has to be bent correctly for images to actually be transmitted through that process. Things that have a left side and a right side, for that whole sequence of photons, they need to all be bent a certain percentage for the image to be conveyed to the person. Now, the trick is that, when two things move apart from each other, this is part of it all gets very deceptive. Okay, so when we move two things apart, it seems like this gets smaller and this gets smaller to these two objects. But the truth is they never get smaller, okay? They're always the same size. So when you're looking at a galaxy and you've lensed using a cluster of galaxies, well, that means your lens, okay, is much bigger than the actual galaxy you're looking at. So there is a real non-parallel element to the light you're receiving. Now, and those things are always kind of important in understanding that, if you were lensing with a galaxy and lensing another galaxy, you can almost see how, boy, that's going to be a real problem because they're the same size and the light rays are all going to be parallel. And so the bending really has to be precise or you're not going to get any focus. So anyway, but the idea that a gravity lens, which is the exact opposite of the standard lens. So the standard lens bends the light a lot at the edges and none in the middle. And the gravity lens bends a lot in the middle and very little at the edges. So it's exactly backwards. It's not going to bring light to a focus. And it just can't function the way they've described it. The images they show can't happen with a gravity lens. It can't happen with a lens that bends less the further away you go. All right. But he's going to just keep pretending he can come up with crap that says it can happen. So this makes no sense to me. So I don't know how Superior Mind responded because I couldn't understand what he was saying. Imagine an object, A. Okay, maybe you should put a comma there. Behind and to the right of a spherical gravitational source. an object is behind a gravitational source. Okay, so we're talking about the lens is the gravitational source, and we have an object behind it and say off to the right or left. I imagine it wouldn't matter. Not centered. Now, most of the images of gravitational lensing, let's understand, have representations of the image on both sides. So they have to be directly behind the other object. And those are the explicit claims of the people saying it's gravitational lensing. Their explicit claim is the object is exactly right behind the object from our point of view. So it's not to the left and it's not to the right. So let's understand, I don't think there's a single image that they claim is from an object to the right or to the left. All right. All right, source S. I don't know why you're using S, but whatever. Gravitational source just sounds strange. So I don't know if I would, you were talking about bending. So you're saying a bending mechanism. The ray from the top point of A will be bent down left. Well, it's to the left. It's going to the down part. I don't even know where you get that from, frankly. It's shooting if it's if it's coming parallel, you know, in the sense that you didn't say that the source was down, so why would there be any down left? And the ray from the bottom point of A will be bent up left. They're going to the bending has to be to the right. It had the lens is always going to bend in, and it's the point is and it can't possibly work unless your lens is smaller than the object, which can't work. So anyway, still you're really in big trouble. I mean, it can't work for us to see a distant object because there won't be enough light. Oh, look, those two rays are bent inward like a convex lens. Frankly, it's nothing like it, so I don't know what you're talking about. So the image of A will be stretched vertically. No, sorry. Compressed horizontally because gravity gets weaker outward. How does it get compressed? We're not talking about the ratio of the change. The inverse square law fact, the fact that the gravity gets substantially weaker as you move away, just means the lens is even more extremely shaped, which also doesn't work. So for you to assume how that the inverse square law amount of change can allow rays coming from two similar points, two places on this shirt, and can be bet the proper proportion is just your assumption. Stretched vertically because gravity points inward from the source. Yeah, like that, I could make nothing out of that. So then Superior Mind says, if the top and bottom rays point someone up toward each other, that shouldn't you be saying the image is compressed vertically as opposed to stretched? Well, whether it's compressed or stretched is going to depend on the proportion of the slope. So again, standard lenses have a standard slope. Now that slope isn't the inverse square law. Okay, that's not even close. It's a much smaller sloping line. It's not anywhere close to a parabola, which is more indicative of the inverse square law. So for this to duplicate a gravitational lens, it would almost have to be a sphere lens. And yes, you get distortions. But really, I'm not talking about distortions. I'm talking about any hope of having two stars next to each other being accurately represented in the final image. All right, let's see. Vertical, yes. Okay, I could say more, but we'll start with that. Yeah, I don't even know how you started with anything because I can't make anything out of this left, right, top, bottom thing. It's still hopeless. Thank you for asking the question. I disagree, though. I'm talking about what would be seen. Another thing to understand is nobody's going to, everywhere around an object, there's a projection of an object. So this lighter, I see it here, but it's creating an image everywhere. Okay. I mean, everywhere, filling this whole room full of technically images of it. There's different set of photons. So the photons that come to me, just I move my eyes a little bit over here, it's a whole new set of photons. The photons I saw here are different than the photons I saw here, but the image is just as real in my eye of that object, if you're getting my drift. So in all space, there's all kinds of images of everything. The argument here is that what you're trying to do is collect the most photons and bring them to one focus. That's how you see a distant object, is you have to take a lot of those images and bring them to one focus. So you multiply the number of photons you're receiving. That's what a backward lens can't do. It can't collect a whole bunch of images in different locations and send them all to one focus. All right. I'm talking about what is seen. A convex lens, for example, makes rays converge to each other. Yeah, that's the whole point. It takes a bunch of rings. You can almost use the ring, what do you call that? That's a certain kind of lens. It's got a name. Where you just make a bunch of rings and in plastic or something, and the rings end up bending the light but that's essentially what a lens is doing, is it's taking a bunch of these images that are on these rings and combining them to one focus. And that's what the wrong lens can't do that. All right. Makes rays converge with each other, and it is used to magnify things. So again, you have to understand what magnifying is. Magnifying is taking a big image, lots of photons, and bringing it to one focus. So the lens on a telescope can be 10 inches. So it's taking that 10-inch image that it's collecting. And if it was only 5 inches, then there's less photons. So you can sort of understand there's a cone that's coming out of each lens size. So if the lens size is this size, then the cone is, small. And if the cone is going this way, but it doesn't matter. And as I make the lens bigger and bigger, I'm making a bigger and bigger cone of possible photons that can possibly be bent to the focus. It'll only be a tiny percentage of all the photons emitted by something that you're collecting. And you're collecting all the ones heading in exactly the right angle to be bent by the lens. But again, the lens has to be big to collect a lot of light, and it has to bend photons in a coherent way, in the sense that they're all going to have to be bent. If they came from the same origin, they'll have to be bent at specifically equal angles. The one coming from the bottom, the one coming from the top, they'll have to be bent at specific angles to create a focus. And a concave lens isn't going to do that. All right, converge with each other is used to magnify things from. So this just says magnifying glass. Yeah, we already know how a magnifying glass works, and it doesn't work with a concave lens. It says a magnifying lens is a convex lens that is used to produce magnified. And again, it's creating it's the only thing a lens is doing. It doesn't magnify anything. it collects an image in space. So there was an image already here without the lens here. Okay, here's the lens. Lens is here. Without the lens here, the same image is going there. So there's a thing over here. I stick the lens in. What is the lens doing? It's just taking an image that already exists in that piece of space and it's bringing it to a specific focus. That's what the lens is doing. So I can move the lens anywhere and create a focus because this lens does that. It bends the light just the right amount for this distance. And that's all there is. There's nothing else to say. I mean, if you change the distance, you change the image that you're going to see, you know, what will be in focus back there. So that if I change the distance of my eye from the lens, I change what is being magnified. And if I go a certain distance, then the light rays cross and I just get blurry and nothing. All right. So I'm not going to go to the Wikipedia page. Yes, I already know how a lens works. Consider the image. So this I just couldn't, I can't make anything out of this. So I just show it for the sake of the fact that you can't make anything out of it. Indecipherable. So we have, this is the focus. The lens isn't in where it's supposed to be here. There's no evidence of a lens. So what is being focused? What is this? It's not even, I can't even tell if this is supposed to be a concave lens. I can't even tell what this is. I can't make anything out of this. Yeah, no, not even close to coherent. And imagine that the point where the rays meet is the eye or something. Well, it's sort of important. In the bottom diagram, the extra convergence gives the illusion that the blue rays came from the points that are more apart than they actually are. So he's saying the light comes in this way, is bent, and we see it over here, the object. But that's really not what we're talking about. We're not talking about seeing objects where they aren't. We're talking about light rays going in, getting bent, and making it possible to see an object further away. So this again, if this was the galactic cluster, the lens is much bigger than the galaxy itself. So the light rays are going out as a cone to the lens is the idea. And I don't know how else to say this. Yeah, well, it still just has nothing to do with the gravity produces more bending here, which means you can't have a focus, and more bending here. So you don't have a focus is the point. So he just keeps ignoring the point that there's no focus. All right. I admit this can actually get very confusing, so I'm not sure if I can answer anything. Yeah, well. Oh yeah, I see it now. I was thinking about how resampling works, but it's not the same thing. Well, whatever. I don't see how any of this makes any sense. I mean, I don't see what the point is of showing objects with not putting the shape of the lens in here. You know, at least some reference to the lens. There's no reference to the lens here. The lens is collecting the photons. It's sort of the important feature. But whatever. I mean, it's a really simple argument, and you know, I just think you could challenge it with some sort of experimental data that would demonstrate that no, you know, in very concave lenses can be used to create very good focusing lenses. You know, a lens that will focus enlarge, take a lot of photons and bring them to a single focus. And that's not what they do. So anyway, so we already did the Franz Liszt thing. Yeah, that, can't do physics if you don't know who the great composers are. I think I'll delete that now. So anyway, so that's it for the comments, and probably there's nothing in the chat. So, dang, I never thought of it that way. How the one item technically fits the entire room with an image. Yeah, Phil's. Yeah, it's everywhere. It's not even, it's not just one plane. It's not just like one, it's like in every distance, there's a different set of photons, that you'll be receiving. And it's, they come from different angles. Like your foot is shooting photons up and straight and left and right. So there's from every location, there's some representation of every bit. And it's a little complicated taking images from those. The bottom line is the images that go to any one specific point in space, wherever that point would be, all of the lines coming from me that would reach that point, the possible photons, they all have to be bent a specific amount to render me again, to show me, to be an image of me. And if they're bent eccentrically, then me and say this lighter, which could be over here, the lighter could be where my eye is in terms of the lens wouldn't be getting it right. It'd be putting things here. It would be bending them so they look like they're here. It wouldn't be able to, it would do great harm to anything structure. And there's no evidence of that great a deal of harm done to those gravitational images. They're clumps of stuff, smears of stuff still very coherent. But it gets quite complicated. But I'm just saying that, look, they should just be able to concede that the textbooks draw it as the wrong shape. All of the documentaries draw it as the wrong shape. NASA draws it as the wrong shape. Nobody draws the lens the right way. So you want to show me one image of gravitational lensing where they give you an image of it, where the lens is the right shape. Just show me one. There's not a single one that I've ever seen. And so there should just be some concession that that's sort of what propaganda looks like, right? When every single piece of material used to illustrate your truth has a fundamental flaw in it. Is there any good reason for that fundamental flaw? Besides the fact that no one really thought about it, that no one's given this nobody's analyzed the strength of this gravitational lensing theory and decided to rigorously test whether it could possibly be true or not true, that they've just all accepted the notion that yes, the light gets bent and it gets bent magnified. That is, more photons are collected and by a bigger area, brought to a single focus by this lens that's bent exactly the wrong way to do that. So the fact that no telescope is built with a giant convex lens in it, to collect light, should mean something to people. Yeah, I would, how long will it take for these arguments to mean anything to people who are supposed to be the guardians of the truth, scientists and even the smart asses who make comments here? I mean, we're all, in a sense, aren't we all responsible to be guardians of the truth? If we're decent people, aren't we supposed to be defending the truth whenever possible from the propagandists, the liars and the cheaters and the thieves? Isn't that part of what it is being a decent human being? It doesn't seem like there's anybody with any interest in that function, of recognizing that as a human obligation. They just talk like they're full of integrity, but they don't show any. And they don't do the obvious. It's just like all the politicians, right? They talk about how they're in it for the people and they care and they're this and they're that, but they don't prove it by creating accountability, where they would get a life sentence in prison for stealing money from the government or willfully or knowingly violating people's constitutional rights. If they were honest, why would they be afraid of laws that made them pay a price for being dishonest? Why are they afraid to have higher accountability? Yeah, it goes from truth defense to ego defense. Asshole humans never notice the bait and switch. Yeah, they never notice that you can't you have to you actually have to have the gladiator war. You have to have the test to declare a winner. You can't just say I won the gold medal theoretically. I won it because everybody agrees with me. It's like all those fallacious arguments, the argument from popularity, or some other kind of bullshit. And it seems like they're completely falling for all of those, what should be traps. They're scientists. They're supposed to know those are logical fallacies. Those are mistakes you make in thinking. And to think that because everybody fell for it means it must be a really solid truth. There's nothing connecting those two dots. And again, if I make the simple argument that the evidence is weak and they'll never agree with it, not one of them yet has said, yeah, I agree, the evidence is a lot weaker than I would like. I couldn't convict somebody and send them to life in prison based on this evidence. I mean, I wonder if there was a rule, would they stake their life on it? I'd stake my life on the fact that they're wrong and I'm closer to right. So if there was some way to judge this in the end, who's right and wrong, who's got more fundamental things wrong and who's got more fundamental things right, I'm quite sure I have more of the fundamental truth in my theory than they have in theirs. And I would stake my life on it. I'd stake being tortured on it because I'm quite certain of it, because the evidence points to it so clearly as being the much simpler answer. So I win just on the Occam razor standard, but I also win because it does unify so easily. So I'm really confident. I wonder how confident they are. I mean, I'd like to test their confidence in quantum mechanics, Heisenberg's and Huygens. Do you really believe that, any of that crap actually happens? That waves break into little pieces and then recombine again to land somewhere as a clump, and all that crap actually happens. That little photons don't really have a location, that they're nowhere until somebody tests to find out where they are. They can fly anywhere in the room, and it isn't until I wave the swatter in the air and all of a sudden hit him that somehow he has a location, but he didn't have one until I hit him. I mean, do they really believe that's how reality works? I mean, it's just terrible. So let's see. That bet your life rule should go with the Rappaport rules on how to criticize an argument. Yeah. Well, I'm just saying that it's always seemed a huge flaw in the battlefield of ideas that there's no accountability. that nobody has to pay for being wrong. And they really should. Then imbeciles would have to actually try. I don't know what that means, but oakley doke. I mean, imbeciles trying when you're an imbecile isn't going to do you any good. You have to first not be an imbecile. So, you have to first get educated before trying means anything. I'm just saying these are smart people. Smart. I shouldn't have to make this. I shouldn't have to aggressively argue to a smart person that your evidence is weak. Okay, that the evidence for all of these, for Bent space, Huygens, Heisenberg, dark matter, multiverses, Copenhagen, all this crap, the evidence is in entangled particles, faster than light, anything, any of that crap. It's incredibly weak evidence. It's not like again, this is far beneath the evidence for, say, evolution or some other theory. And we see how few common people even accept that theory, even though it's so well evidenced. And here, these are scientists, and they're behaving even worse in a way, because they don't have any excuse for not admitting that, yeah, they haven't proven anything yet. I mean, they have no model. They have no, when you're still calling something a virtual photon, can't you people admit your model has holes in it, gaping gigantic holes? When you have to say virtual photons did it, can't you concede your model has a huge gaping hole in it? I mean, just a gigantic monstrous hole, when the fundamental force, the mechanism that makes it all happen, is the mechanism you have no clue how it functions. I mean, it's the key function of magnetism, and they have a virtual explanation. And yet they're so fucking arrogant. Well, I wouldn't say that most atheists have turned it into phantasmagorical. The sad part is most atheists have decided to be as dumb as evolution. Like, they've decided, because evolution is dumb and nature's dumb, I can be dumb and I can pretend I don't know that suffering sucks, and I don't know that it's a bad thing to impose it, because nature doesn't know, I don't have to know. That's the scarier part. But yes, the phantasmagoricals are bad, but the nihilists are scarier. The language has been fucked up because theory denotes something proven and denotes something unproven. I don't know. I don't think these word games matter. I think theory is a perfectly good word. You're proposing an explanation. It's difficult to say anything is an absolute fact except things like water is wet. So everything else is a little theoretical. I don't find that a problematic word. I just find the idea that you think your theory of Sasquatch is the most viable explanation, when I have a box sitting in the back room that says Sasquatch suit on it, and I found it outside where you saw the Sasquatch. I mean, I have a competing theory, I think, that's a lot better than your silly Sasquatch theory. Language has been fucked up because theory denotes something proven and denotes something unproven. Yeah, though I still don't think it does that. I don't think the word theory tells you how strong a theory it is. It's just about evidence. The word evidence is a great word, but there's this huge difference between strong evidence and weak evidence. It's the same word, and no one's conceding, no one's paying any attention to the fact that saying I have evidence when I have very little evidence okay, is a real problem. And regular physics is claiming they have strong, good reasons to strongly believe they have a correct model when they don't have strong reasons. They have very weak reasons, very weak evidence. Yeah, I don't even think they want to do their magical matter as a theory. I don't even know whether any of this is intentional. I just think it's the way the propaganda engine grows with this incremental thing. They make heroes out of people and they can't rewrite those histories. So they have to keep, what's been done. And you can see some of them struggling with it now. You can see some physicists who are basically conceding, yes, we have two incompatible theories. One of them's wrong, or they're both wrong. But, there's some conceding they have a problem. I mean, there's a lot of them who want to get rid of bent space because they kind of know it's not logical. But here, quantum mechanics is just is silly. So yeah, it's hard to figure which one is stupider. But yeah, it just happens little pieces at a time. So they just um, I don't want to make excuses for them, but I just mean that's how somehow it happened, and being a dissident or rejecting something was just too undignified. I mean, it's too much of an insult to even consider the possibility that they've all been jerking off to the bad porn. So, so the weak evidence thing is something I just keep running into. And the idea of defining some of this stuff, it's as soon as somebody says words like, so the Bill Gates guy did a couple of videos like, what is energy? So they're just sort of playing with a word. And the Jeff G guy's sort of done that too. And it's like I said, it's not an invalid concept, but some of these words are just kind of useless in the conversation, because the word is used too general for the fact that there's this, without understanding of the specific circumstance. I mean, I obviously can't see any of these physics words meaning anything outside of the context of understanding the difference between forces and the matter bits getting pushed by the forces. And there's this clear, obvious fact that that's what takes place. Matter doesn't just magically do anything, it has to be forced to do something. And there's a real reason it gets forced to do something. Something real obliges it. This really isn't about Anaconda. Do you respect Anaconda for making a video about why he is not unsubbing from the amendment? I don't. What's the respect? I mean, I think his phrase was a cult of the victim. That so again, this argument that first off that I'm leader or part of a cult, which is idiotic. That it all is a dogmatic philosophy when it's clearly just based on factual truth, evolution, and whatnot. I didn't make the world a cruel and horrible place. It is a cruel and horrible place. Deserve has little to do with what happens to every critter that wakes up with a conscious brain. Does the little sea turtle deserve to hatch from the egg and 6.5 minutes later get pecked to death by a bird? Did he somehow deserve it? You do something wrong. I'm just saying, it's just so he's I can just return the compliment and just say he's running a cult of the perpetrator. Where they just find excuses and rationalizations to be selfish and brutal and cruel and pretend, well, I didn't know any better. It's despicable shit. I mean, if he just made the first video, I would have said, okay, that's nice enough. Because at least he said I was smart or something else in there. He had some brilliant arguments. Just he said a few little nice things. But the second video was just a gratuitous backtrack where, no, he's just a lunatic cult figure. And it's fun to watch lunatic cult figures. But somehow when a lunatic argues with you, it somehow forces you to think about what you're doing. How does that even make any sense? How often does it happen in your life where a cult leader brings you information that somehow challenges you and makes you stronger? I don't know how that happens exactly. Well, anyway, so yeah, if he didn't make the second video, I would have been, yes, I would have said, oh, that was nice of him, but fuck him. So anyway, so the other, I've sort of done the other stuff when I go through these arguments. I guess I should make a video on the energy thing, but I think it's in the questions videos. The fact that their theories don't explain the most fundamental energetic events, and the sense that they have no force. So we have an event, and yet we have no explanation of the force that makes the event, where it came from, how the influence was imposed. So we just have magical gravity makes things move by magic. The thing sits here, and somehow the magic tells it, little atoms in here, you all have to move. You all have to move. You all have to move. Somehow the magic just move. And that's that's modeling reality, and that's supposed to be a scientific view. Just the magic makes it happen. I mean, it's just so bad an explanation. I just still don't. It is hard to understand, really. I don't know, because everybody, when Einstein first published it and people talked about it a little bit, nobody really liked it because, yeah, it was just this nothing. There's nothing to hang on to. And then, the Eddington, a huge propagandist for Einstein, right? So a guy who's got a huge prejudice does this really, really, theoretically pretty much impossible experiment, and then does it badly. So he does this experiment that even under perfect conditions is really hard to be able to do in the first place, that is detect solar lensing. And it can only happen by Einstein's math because of this rig where you get rid of half of your problems. So it's based on a theory that is suspect, to say the least. And then even with Einstein's cheat, it's hugely difficult to do. And yeah, and so Eddington says, yes, I did it, even though he admits in his own diary he wouldn't stake his life on it. And the New York Times says Einstein right. And then that's it. We don't have, that's, and then we have a few little incidental proofs, like the fact that Einstein's prediction that there'd be a relationship between velocity and clocks malfunctioning, which isn't a huge surprise. But again, Einstein's given credit for predicting it when other people had already predicted that. Let's see. Have you seen the Google Talks lecture where the guy says quantum mechanics is not as magical as it's portrayed? Well, the Google Talks lectures are really bad, but you have to give me more information about who's doing the talking. Because look, there's no, there's no way to fix quantum mechanics. I'm sorry. I mean, you can say it's not as bad as it's portrayed. It's probably in some of their brains a lot worse. I mean, I think Feynman's interpretation is almost silly. Yes, he doesn't do much Heisenberg and Huygens. He doesn't worry about wave interference. He just says there's a random number generator that somehow tells everything to go do these bending rules. But they're just magical bending rules. The lecturer mentions that Feynman said that if you think you know quantum mechanics, then you don't know quantum mechanics. Well, Feynman didn't say that. Feynman quoted that. But they use the word understand. They don't use the word know. So if you think you understand quantum mechanics, then you don't understand quantum mechanics because no one's supposed to understand it. Right. But you can't understand it in the sense that it's magic. There's nothing to understand. There's some magical mechanism where photons somehow, okay, are being bent in their direction. So they're changed in where they're going to go. And they think, instead of the fact that they're interacting with matter is why they're being bent, they think it's because the photon splits in two and it creates two waves, and the waves interfere with each other, which isn't even revealed in their own mathematics, because in the photon experiment, the two-slit experiment doesn't fit the math for the interference pattern. It's wrong. The light doesn't gradually go light and gradually go dark and gradually go light and gradually go dark. It creates very distinct bars of light. So, and it's an on-off pattern. Again, it's the simplest pattern you can create and call it a pattern. And they think that, wow, it's got to be interference because it's on, off, on, off, on, off. No, you can create on, off a lot of ways without any interference at all. I just put anything eccentric on something orbiting. The Earth has essentially got an on-off switch on it, right? I mean, the moon's on one side every day. I mean, not every day. Well, it's in one position relative to the Earth, once every 26 days or whatever the number is. And that's sort of an on-off pattern, right? The moon is over here, on, over here, on, and off, and then on, and then off. I mean, this on-off can happen all kinds of ways. Yet they, well, anyway, so there's only two kinds of quantum mechanics, right? There's either Heisenberg-Huygens as the cause, waves as the cause, or probability. It's just the fact. It's a fact of the fundamental structure of the universe is that photons somehow do this thing. And that's it. There's no explanation for how they do it. They just do it. And both of those answers are not good answers. I mean, you can't understand them. I can't understand them as answers because they don't answer the question. I mean, Huygens and Heisenberg answers it, but it doesn't answer it with anything reasonable. The photon, although in every other circumstance has the appearance that it moves in a straight line between point A and point B at a constant speed, and yet somehow I'm supposed to believe it doesn't have a location and a position. Well, it has to move in a straight line. I mean, it's just stupid. Oh, well, that's on polarization. So that lecture doesn't have much to do with quantum mechanics. That guy is just talking about polarized film, and he's just pointing. See there. I've done videos on the polarized thing. There's nothing magical about when you put the second filter in between the two other filters and change the results, because the whole idea is the filters aren't just detecting the polarization, they're causing polarization. So when you put a filter in, you're changing the polarization of the light. You're bending it a little bit more. So, and that explains exactly why you have the effect. So there's nothing magical in that. And that's a tiny part of quantum mechanics, is the subject of how polarized films detect polarization. And again, all you have to do to fix the paradox or the weirdness of polarizing films is to understand that each one of the films is bending the light a little bit. So it's taking light that's 5 degrees off and bending it up to 0. So it's fixing light that wasn't polarized and making it polarized. Yeah, I don't need the link. Like I said, I've seen the video. Well, somebody else can have the link, but I'm just saying, you already typed the title. That's all they need if they want to see it. It's like 6 years old now or something. And the first half is on polarized film, and the second half is trying to say the total value of the universe is 0, not 1, or it's some kind of mathematical gimmick. But there really isn't much quantum mechanics in any of the traditional sense. It doesn't have anything really to do with waves. And that's really quantum mechanics' obsession. Yeah, I had a lot higher hopes when I first saw that video. I said, finally, somebody's going to tear this shit apart. And yeah, didn't do that. So, I don't know if there's much else to go over. This isn't all stuff I've already gone over. And yeah, I don't think there's anything specific. So yeah, just not getting any useful challenges to any of the points I've made. For anyone new, if you go to my channel page, there's 2 playlists that are kind of important: overview and questions. And the overview videos give you a simple outline of the basic theory I'm proposing, and the question videos are attacks against the conventional science that fails the test because nobody can answer the simple questions. And such. So I guess that's enough for today. And such, just aren't enough participants. And so again, I have to somehow grow this audience to get enough energy and such. Find somebody who can answer the questions. Well, who's John Lennox? I mean, who's John Lennox? I mean, to say quantum physics is nothing isn't really a statement. I don't even know what that means. I mean, there's obviously you can't say everything that could fit in the category of quantum electrodynamics or some other thing is garbage. But clearly, in 1930, whatever, that stuff is garbage. The stuff they threw in becomes garbage. Uh, well, the math is the math. I mean, mathematics, in my opinion, in a lot of respects, is a garbage model. I mean, again, Heisenberg isn't mathematics. Huygens is not mathematics. Huygens is a claim about the properties of a photon and what it's going to do and how it, the fact that it does something. There's no math for Huygens. You can only represent the effect. You can't mathematically represent the cause. So what good is math that doesn't take into account causes? I mean, identifying the effects is the easy part. The whole point of physics is to figure out the causes. And there's no mathematics that creates the cause of Heisenberg. That's just a statement they've made, a declaration. We're going to declare photons to be unsettled when they don't have any evidence that they're not in a specific position and location all the time. They're just using that as an excuse for the effect. They're saying because the photon doesn't know where it is here, we can't know where it is there. Yeah. So if we just make photons magically uncertain about where they are, then we can make them go anywhere we want them to go. And it's just by magic. There's no logic to why that would be true. So anyway, I mean, I'm glad somebody says quantum mechanics is something. I mean, nothing is not a silly word, but to say it's not a model of reality would be, the more people saying that, the better. But I don't know if that's what he said. It's a crappy model of reality. Doesn't have very many proven elements to it. This isn't the way to say it. All right. Now, let's see how many people were here just for my FYI and such. 9. Yeah, that's pretty bad. Okay. Well, not much you can do. So till the next time and such and so forth and whatnot.